At the Crystal Al Noor Hotel, a billion-dollar negotiation between Britain and an Arab sheikh was unraveling fast. The wealthy tycoon shot up from his chair in rage, barked something in Arabic, and stormed toward the door. Nobody in the hall understood the words, but everyone could feel the sting of an insult that could sink the deal in seconds. Then, from the corner where a maid had been quietly mopping, a voice rose steady and clear. She answered him in flawless Arabic. The room froze. The sheikh halted mid-step, his hand still on the doorframe, and slowly turned back. Her name was Madison Carter, just 26, her long dark hair tied back neatly. She wore the crisp plain uniform of a hotel housekeeper, no makeup, no jewelry. Nothing about her looked extraordinary until she spoke. Her tone carried a calm authority, her words precise and respectful. "Forgive them, Your Excellency. That was not their meaning. They wish only for fair partnership." Her accent was perfect, the polished dialect of the Gulf. It wasn't something you could fake. The sheikh narrowed his eyes, studying her closely. "You know my language?" he asked. His voice was low, cautious. Madison dipped her head respectfully. "I lived in Oman for 8 years," she replied. Silence spread through the room. Simon, the British negotiator in a tailored suit, stared dumbly, his pen frozen mid-air. The interpreter looked like he'd just been exposed as a fraud. Even the sheikh's assistants paused, unsure of what they were witnessing. Madison stood still, hands folded calmly in front of her, not fidgeting, not shrinking back. It was as if the entire balance of the deal had shifted in that single exchange. No one had expected the maid to become the anchor holding a billion-dollar negotiation together, but not everyone was impressed. From the British side, Claire, a sleek woman in a designer scarf, leaned toward her colleague and sneered loud enough to be heard. "Who let the cleaning lady think she belongs here?" Her laugh was sharp, cutting, and a few others chuckled with her. Madison's hands tensed against her apron, but her face stayed serene. She didn't turn, didn't snap back. She simply squared her shoulders, letting Claire know she'd heard. Claire's smug friend added with a smirk, "Maybe she's here to mop up our mistakes." The laughter rippled cruelly through the room. Then Madison's gaze flicked briefly toward Claire, her eyes steady, her voice soft but firm, spoken in Arabic. "Intent matters." The words were barely above a whisper, but they sliced through the air. Claire froze, her smirk faltering, suddenly unsure if she'd just been confronted. Before the weight of the moment could settle, the hotel manager stormed in. Paul, slick-haired and self-important, marched straight to Madison, his face flushed with anger. He grabbed her arm and hissed loud enough for all to hear. "What do you think you're doing? You have no place in this negotiation." Madison didn't resist, didn't protest. She only looked at him with calm, almost weary eyes and nodded once. But Paul wasn't done. His voice rose. "You're a housekeeper, Madison. You clean floors. That's it. You don't belong here." The British team shifted uneasily, some staring at the floor, others pretending to check their phones. The sheikh crossed his arms, silent, watching. Madison bowed politely to Paul, her composure unbroken, and walked toward the door. The mop stood abandoned against the wall, like a witness to everything. Just as she reached the doorway, one of the sheikh's young assistants, a neatly groomed man with nervous eyes, called after her in mocking Arabic, "Leaving so soon? The room isn't even clean yet." A few chuckles rippled across the hall. Madison paused, her hand on the doorframe. She didn't turn back. Her voice was calm, steady, almost like a warning. "Even cleanliness begins with respect." The room went still again. The assistant's smirk disappeared, his constant habit of checking the time forgotten. Zaid's lips twitched, almost forming a smile, but he stayed silent. The once loud room now felt weighted, the earlier laughter swallowed by uneasy quiet as Madison's footsteps faded down the hall. No one dared to speak after she left. The air itself seemed colder, judgment and regret thick in every corner. Paul tugged at his tie, mumbling something about standards to Simon. Simon nodded quickly, but his eyes kept flicking toward the doorway like he couldn't shake her presence. Zaid hadn't moved at all. His stone-faced assistants leaned close to each other, whispering nervously, their glances darting between their boss and the empty entrance. The interpreter tried to restart the session, but his voice cracked under the tension. No one paid him any attention. Everyone knew the deal was slipping, fragile as glass. Meanwhile, in the corridor, Madison paused, leaning briefly against the cool wall. Her fingers brushed the edge of the notebook hidden in her apron. She exhaled slowly, then walked on, her footsteps muffled on the marble floor. As she entered the service corridor, a cluster of kitchen staff noticed her. Grease-stained aprons, clattering pans, and loud laughter filled the space. One broad-shouldered chef, known for waving his ladle like a sword, shouted across the hall, "Look at that. Our maid thinks she's running the place now." His booming laugh bounced against the tiles. Others joined in, tossing barbed jokes. "What's next? You'll take over the hotel?" A damp rag was flung, landing crumpled by her feet. Madison stopped. She bent down, lifted the rag, folded it neatly, and placed it on a cart. Her voice was gentle but carried enough weight to silence the air. "Work doesn't need a title." The chef's laughter died mid-breath. His ladle lowered. The others grew quiet, their smirks dissolving under her calm gaze. Without another word, Madison continued walking, her steps steady, leaving the hush of shame behind her. In the grand lobby, a crowd of wealthy guests dripping in diamonds and tailored suits noticed her passing. One woman in a fur stole raised her glass and said loudly, "Is that the maid who thought she was a diplomat?" Laughter clinked with champagne. Madison's stride slowed, but she didn't turn to them. She adjusted her bag deliberately and moved forward. A man with a gaudy tie called after her, his voice mocking, "Stick to your mop, sweetheart." This time, Madison stopped. She glanced back, her eyes calm but unyielding. "A mop cleans floors," she said softly. "What cleans arrogance?" The man froze, his glass halfway to his lips. The laughter evaporated. Eyes dropped away, ashamed, as Madison pushed through the revolving doors and disappeared outside. Back in the conference room, tension still clung to the air. Simon, desperate, slid a fresh set of papers toward Zaid, forcing a weak smile. "Your Excellency, perhaps we can clarify," but Zaid raised a hand, silencing him. His voice was measured, heavy. "Let her sit." His gaze remained fixed on the door. The words struck the room like a stone. Simon blinked in confusion. Paul stepped forward quickly, his face twisted. "Sir, she's just—" Zaid's eyes cut to Paul, sharp and final. Paul stopped mid-sentence, his jaw snapping shut. Zaid repeated, slower this time, with authority, "Let her sit. She will translate." For a moment, the room held its breath, as if waiting for a punchline. Then one of Zaid's men pulled out a chair. The scrape of wood against the floor echoed loud in the silence. Madison was called back. She entered, her face as composed as before, and quietly took her seat. Opening her notebook, she began to translate. Each word clear, each phrase exact, her voice carrying both accuracy and weight. Zaid gave the faintest nod, lips pressed in a firm line, saying nothing. But his eyes never left her. During a short break, Claire approached, her designer scarf draped just so, her smile tight with spite. "You must feel clever," she said sweetly, venom laced in her tone. "Stepping in like that. But let's be real, you're way out of your depth, aren't you?" Madison calmly set her pen down, her movements slow and precise. She met Claire's eyes steadily. "Depth isn't measured by titles," she replied. Claire's smile wavered. Her fingers clenched the edge of her scarf. Across the table, a few of her colleagues glanced over, their conversations halting. Madison returned to her notebook, resuming her work as though Claire's words were no more than background noise. Claire stood there a moment longer, her confidence cracked before retreating. The negotiations pressed on, smoother now. Madison didn't merely translate words, she captured intent, nuance, the delicate balance behind every phrase. Zaid responded with short, precise statements, and Madison conveyed them with perfect clarity. Simon kept stealing looks at her, his frown deepening. One of his team, a woman with pearls around her neck, leaned close and whispered, "Who is she really?" Simon only shook his head, unable to answer. At the end, Zaid rose, gave Madison a long, steady look, and walked out without a single word. The British delegation packed their things quickly, muttering about schedules and missed flights. But Paul lingered, his jaw tight, his face flushed red. In the lobby, he planted himself near the entrance, arms folded like a guard on duty. When Madison appeared, he stepped directly into her path. "Who do you think you are?" he snapped, his voice sharp. "A janitor pretending to be a translator? You've disgraced this hotel." Madison didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her pocket, unclipped her name badge, and placed it gently on the reception counter. The soft click echoed like a door closing. With a small bow, just as she had given in the negotiation room, She turned and walked away, her notebook clutched firmly in hand. A few guests seated in the lobby glanced up. Their eyes carried sympathy, but Madison never turned back. She pushed through the revolving doors, her stride steady, her face unreadable. Behind her, Paul was already shouting into his phone, pacing furiously. "Fire her immediately. She's finished. Nobody humiliates me like that." The concierge, a young woman with her hair pulled into a neat bun, overheard him. She pursed her lips and shook her head quietly. She'd seen Madison cover endless shifts without complaint, but she kept her silence. So did everyone else. Outside, one of the hotel valets spotted her. He was young, with a crooked grin and a habit of speaking too fast. "Hey, you're the maid who spoke Arabic, right? What now? You think you're some kind of hero?" His tone was playful, but the sting of mockery lingered. A few of the other valets chuckled from the sidelines. Madison slowed, adjusting the strap of her bag. She turned just enough for her gaze to meet his. "Heroes don't mop floors," she said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that cut through the laughter. "But they don't mock them either." The valet's grin faded. His hands slipped into his pockets. The others dropped their smirks, and silence settled over the drive as Madison continued into the blistering Dubai heat, her face set and her pace calm. That evening, an urgent envelope sealed with wax arrived at the hotel's front desk. It bore the crest of Sheikh Zadeh's office. The concierge handed it to Paul, who ripped it open with a smug grin, expecting a reprimand for the day's chaos. But his confidence drained as he read the single line inside. "Keep her. Bring her to me. Privately." Paul's hands trembled as he folded the letter, his jaw locking tight. Without a word, he stormed off toward his office. Soon after, Madison was summoned to the penthouse. She entered still wearing her uniform, braced for a lecture. Instead, she found Sheikh Zaid seated at a sleek glass table, a small velvet box resting in front of him. He gestured for her to sit. Madison obeyed, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Zaid slid the box toward her, his expression unreadable. Inside lay a letter, sealed with the national crest of the UAE. She opened it carefully, treating it as though it were fragile porcelain. The words stunned her. It was a formal invitation to join the Language Advisory Board at the upcoming Abu Dhabi Energy Summit. Zaid leaned back in his chair, his voice firm and measured. "You didn't just translate today," he said. "You understood meaning, something most advisors fail to achieve after years in the field." By the door, Zaid's assistant, the one forever fiddling with his watch, shifted uncomfortably. His sneer returned as he muttered in Arabic, his tone sharp and dismissive. "Don't fool yourself. This was luck. You're still only the help." Madison's fingers paused over the letter. Slowly, she looked up at him, her gaze unwavering. In Arabic, her reply was calm but cutting. "Help builds empires. What do you build?" The assistant stiffened, his hand frozen on his watch. Zaid raised an eyebrow but remained silent, letting her words hang in the air. Madison stood, bowed politely to the sheikh, and left with the letter tucked carefully into her bag. The assistant stayed behind, jaw clenched, his confidence stripped away. When Madison exited the penthouse, the elevator doors opened to reveal the hotel's events planner. Clipboard in hand, dressed in a sharp-tailored suit, the woman gave Madison a dismissive look. "So you're the maid behind all this trouble," she sneered. "This hotel doesn't need drama from the cleaning staff." Her words echoed in the small space, drawing a smirk from a nearby bellhop. Madison adjusted her bag, brushing her fingers over the sealed letter inside. She met the planner's eyes without flinching. "Drama fades," she said softly. "Skill doesn't." The planner faltered, her clipboard slipping slightly. The bellhop's grin vanished. Madison stepped out as the elevator chimed, her steps steady, her presence leaving the air weighted in her wake. Days later, Madison walked into the grand hall of the Abu Dhabi Energy Summit for the first time. Her plain dress contrasted against the glittering gowns and polished suits around her. Dozens of powerful figures turned their heads, some whispering, some staring. Before the session began, a journalist with crimson lipstick and a notepad approached her. With a smirk sharp enough to cut, she asked, "So, you're the maid who got lucky? Care to explain how you managed to charm your way in here?" The question lingered like smoke, daring a response. Madison set her notebook down on the table, every movement deliberate. She met the journalist's stare, her eyes steady and unyielding. Charm doesn't learn languages, Madison replied. Work does. The journalist's smirk faltered, her pen hovering midair. Around them, the low chatter of reporters thinned to silence as Madison calmly returned to her notes, her focus unshaken. By the following morning, whispers had turned into gossip. It wasn't flattering. In the hotel break room, a group of staff clustered around the vending machine. Tara, the front desk clerk known for heavy perfume and a sugary smile, spoke loud enough for all to hear. She's not even attractive, she scoffed. Must have caught the sheik's attention. That's the only reason. Another clerk, a man with shiny gelled hair and a booming laugh, added, Yeah, she probably batted her eyelashes for a promotion. The rumor raced through the corridors, spilling into whispers between bellhops and waiters. By evening, a tabloid headline lit up screens. A wink that changed her life at a Dubai hotel. Madison's phone buzzed relentlessly. Old acquaintances, people she hadn't spoken to in years, filled her inbox with pointed messages. Really, Madison? That's how you made it? One wrote. Another text was shorter. Lucky break, she ignored them. Her social media apps were deleted, her accounts silenced. Her notebook stayed close, always tucked in her bag, a shield against the noise. A week later at the hotel, Tara was manning the front desk when a guest in a gold watch and thick accent leaned over. That Madison girl, she's the one who got famous, yes? He said loudly. Tell her to clean my room next time. She must be very skilled. The line of waiting guests chuckled, their laughter echoing through the lobby. Tara smirked, leaning across the counter. Oh, she's moved on to bigger things, she said. Probably thinks she's too important for us now. The concierge nearby gripped her pen tighter, her knuckles pale. She'd seen Madison mop floors long after her shift ended, never complaining once. She wanted to defend her but stayed quiet. Madison wasn't there to hear any of it. She was already in Abu Dhabi, preparing her notes for a press conference. When Madison arrived at the summit, the hall was overflowing. Reporters packed the aisles, cameras flashing, eager for a misstep. She walked to the podium dressed in plain black, her hair tied back, no jewelry, no makeup, just herself. She began with a passage in classical Arabic, her tone even and deliberate, weaving Hijazi proverbs with a cadence that felt both ancient and alive. The room fell silent. An elderly professor in a tweed jacket rose to his feet, his hands trembling as he clapped. I never thought I would hear this form again. From an American, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Others followed, applause filling the hall. The next morning's headlines declared, No more doubt, she's a Gulf linguistics specialist. In his office, Sheikh Zayda read the coverage with the faintest smile, tapping his fingers against the desk. Soon after, Madison was appointed chief interpreter for the upcoming OPEC summit. At the preparatory meeting, she entered quietly, notebook in hand. One of the interpreters, a man in a sharp suit with a smug grin, leaned back in his chair. So you're the housekeeper they keep writing about, he said loudly, drawing stares. Must be nice to skip the line. Some chuckled, others turned away. Madison set her bag down carefully and opened her notebook. She looked at him evenly. Lines don't matter, she replied. Accuracy does, he scoffed, but his confidence wavered when she began translating a dense technical document. Her tone was fluid, her delivery flawless. The room shifted, smirks fading, skepticism dissolving into quiet respect. Back in the U.S. for a short visit, Madison sat at her aunt's kitchen table, the smell of burnt toast and coffee hanging in the air. Her family, a mix of cousins and uncles who'd never left their small town, eyed her with suspicion. You just got lucky, her cousin Jenna said, tapping her nails against the table. Right place, right time. Her uncle adjusted his cap and added, Don't get full of yourself, Madison. It's not like you earned it. She only smiled, her hands wrapped around her mug. She didn't argue. On her flight back to the UAE, Madison opened her notebook. Pages brimmed with notes from 3 new languages she was teaching herself. Across the aisle, a young Egyptian boy chattered to his mother, his voice bright. Madison leaned over and spoke to him in classical Arabic. The boy giggled, his eyes wide with wonder. His mother's gaze softened, tears welling as she whispered, Thank you. A flight attendant passing by noticed the notebook in Madison's lap. Her smile was thin, her tone sharp. Studying on a plane? You must think you're important now. Nearby passengers turned to listen, curiosity rising. Madison closed her notebook slowly, one finger marking her place, and lifted her gaze. "Learning never ends," she said, her voice quiet yet firm. The flight attendant's smile stiffened before she turned on her heel, the sound of her footsteps fading down the aisle. The boy's mother, still watching, gave Madison a small, grateful nod, her eyes warm. Madison simply reopened her notebook, letting her pen glide across the page as if nothing had interrupted her. Before the OPEC summit officially began, Madison sat in a side chamber reviewing documents. A junior diplomat, barely older than a college student, sauntered up. His badge swung proudly from his chest, his hair slick, his grin smug. "So you're the maid who lucked into this job," he said loudly, making sure others could hear. "Bet you're just here to smile for the cameras." His laugh was sharp, deliberately cutting. Madison placed her papers down with measured calm and looked directly at him. Her expression was still, but her words carried weight. "Pictures fade," she said evenly. "But words last forever." His smirk faltered. Suddenly, the badge on his chest seemed oversized, too heavy. Around them, conversations paused, others avoiding eye contact as Madison returned to her work, pen steady in hand. The summit itself was unlike anything before. Madison entered not as a maid, not as an overlooked figure, but seated at the very front of the table. Her attire remained modest, her hair pulled back, yet the atmosphere shifted the moment she stepped in. The British delegation was already there, Simon among them. His grin was smaller now, his handshake brief, his gaze sliding away from hers. Then came Zaid, last to arrive, his presence filling the hall like a storm cloud. He said little, but his nod toward Madison spoke volumes. When the sessions began, all eyes turned as Madison translated, her voice controlled, her pen moving in rhythm with every phrase. During a recess, a reporter shoved a microphone near her. "How does a hotel maid climb this high?" he asked, his tone biting. Madison met his stare calmly. "I never thought that work was beneath me," she answered. "Anywhere there's language, there's value." The reporter blinked, caught off guard, then scribbled her words into his notebook. At the closing banquet, as Madison stood by the dessert table, a senior British executive approached. His silver hair gleamed, his Rolex catching the light. His voice was smooth but laced with condescension. "You've done well for yourself," he said. "But let's not pretend this isn't a fairy tale." His smile was thin, his eyes sharp. Madison carefully set down her plate, then looked at him without flinching. "Fairy tales end," she said softly. "Work doesn't." The man froze, his grin faltering as his hand tightened around his glass. Conversations nearby stalled. The room seemed to hold its breath as Madison walked away, composed and unshaken. Days later, Reuters ran a headline in bold print. "Sheikh Zayed Al Fulan names Madison Carter senior advisor. Announces $2 billion investment in U.S." The article quoted him directly. "She sees what others overlook. That's worth more than money." The business world took notice. Her inbox overflowed with requests for meetings from investors eager to sit across from her. Yet Madison didn't boast, didn't pause to celebrate. She returned to her notes, her pen always in motion. Back at the Crystal Al Nur Hotel, everything had shifted. Paul, the manager, was dismissed quietly. No speeches, no farewell. Just gone. Tara, the clerk, found herself exposed after a guest's post about her mocking words went viral. The fashion sponsorship she bragged about? Canceled overnight. And Simon's team, once proud, lost a major contract. Their reputation fractured after whispers of their Dubai blunder spread. None of the articles named Madison outright. They didn't need to. Her presence lingered like gravity, silent, undeniable. Madison didn't glance back. She didn't need to. Her stride was steady now, her presence carrying its own weight. The world had shifted not because she demanded it, but because she never stopped being herself. Her quiet wasn't weakness, it was strength forged from years of being underestimated. Notebook in her bag, eyes on the horizon, she kept moving toward the next summit, the next language, the next challenge. Those who ridiculed her, doubted her, dismissed her, they were still talking, still trying to explain her rise away. But their words no longer mattered. The truth did, and it was louder than any rumor. To anyone who's been belittled, overlooked, or made to feel small, your worth has always been there. You were never invisible. You are still seen. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and follow along this journey through betrayal, heartbreak, and finally resilience and triumph.